Hello, beautiful people, and welcome. We're going to go over the module 18. I believe it's 18.1 and 18.2 for the IM3 quiz. Now, disclaimer, we are on campus, so if you hear a loud bell or the intercom goes off, I do apologize in advance. Also, I am human, so if I make a mistake, just let me know where the mistake occurs, so that way we both can learn from my mistake. Let's get started. There's a lot of key terms in this quiz. You need to know what those mean in order to know what it's asking. The first key term that it's asking is coterminal. Coterminal means that you start on your initial ray. So if we have an angle, you start on the initial ray or the initial side, which is always on the positive x side, and then you end at the same spot. So you end on your terminal ray or your terminal side. Now, how many loop-de-loops you do in the middle doesn't really matter. Coterminal just means you start at the same side and you stop at the same side. So in this case, it's asking for a positive. So you need one positive and one negative coterminal angle. So again, where does negative 315 degrees? 350 degrees is about here-ish. And so we want something that is a positive. Oh, excuse me, I did that wrong. It's negative 350 degrees. So let me quickly erase that. Glad I caught that. Negative means you go the opposite direction. So it's going to be here. The distance traveled is the same. All you need is direction for negative. Okay, direction means you go clockwise for negative, counterclockwise for positive. Since it's negative, we're going to go clockwise. Okay, now the easiest way to find out what your coterminal angle is remember those loop-de-loops that I talked about, those rotations? Well, we're gonna use them rotations. So the first thing we need to do, we have negative 315. I'm gonna add a full rotation to that. So I have negative 315 plus 360, and that's equal to 45. So one of my coterminal angles is 45 degrees. That means I start and I stop at the same rays. Now it's also asking for a negative coterminal. You cannot use the one that they already gave you. It's asking for a coterminal angle. If you give me the same thing, so some of you decided to give me negative 315, that is not a coterminal angle. That is the angle. So for a coterminal angle, and you want it negative, I'm going to take negative 315 minus 360, negative 315 minus 360, and that is negative 675 degrees. You must include degrees. If you do not put your unit of measure, in this case degrees, I'm going to assume they are radians and it would be considered incorrect. So you have two angles here. Question number 2, find a coterminal angle between 0 and 360 degrees. Again, coterminal is another keyword, or the same keyword. Coterminal angle means you begin at the initial ray and you end at the same terminal ray. Loop-de-loops don't matter, but in this case, they want the angle to be between 0 and 360. So in order to do that, I'm noticing I have a pretty large angle at 715 degrees. So in order to figure out a smaller angle, I'm actually going to subtract 360 degrees. I'm going to subtract one full rotation, and that gives me 355 degrees. Is 355 less than 360 and greater than 0? Yes, it is. So you are done. Okay, convert each radian measure into degrees. So you know you are given a radian, you want degrees. So you are converting. So there is a conversion. So the way to do this is, because you want degrees, degrees are going to go on top and radians are going to go on the bottom. So this is something you need to memorize. This is your conversion rate. And now here you are multiplying and you're dividing. So I'm going to get rid of my pi's and I'm going to get rid of my 18. The 0 is left over. That means I have a 10 on top. So now I have negative 19 times 10. So that means I have negative 190. What do I have? Degrees. If you don't put your unit of measure, it will be marked wrong. It will be considered in radians. convert each degree measure into radians. So now we're going the opposite direction. Given to us is degrees, we want radians. So now we want for our conversion to have pi on top since we want our answer in radians. So I'm going to cross out them zeros. 6 goes into 18 3 times. So what is left over? This negative is left over, pi and 3. So I have negative pi thirds as my radians. Find the exact value of each trigonometric function. Now this here, in part 1 of your quiz, you were to derive the unit circle. And so these here, once you have that, should be rather simple. But let me walk you through them because a lot of you did end up getting these incorrect. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to find coterminal angles or reference angles because I don't have this on my unit circle. So I'm going to just start subtracting. So negative 1035, and I'm going to subtract, I'm going to add. So negative 1035, and I'm going to add 360 degrees. And I'm going to add that until I get something that is between 0 and 360. Now I can add 360 to that as well, which gives me a reference angle of 45 or a coterminal angle of 45. Now 316, let me draw this out, is negative 300. I almost did it again. Negative 316 degrees, 15 degrees is here. And I'm looking at my unit circle. Let me get that out. 315 degrees negative is the same thing as a positive 45. So positive 45 is root 2 over 2 and root 2 over 2. So I know, let me do that, or positive 45. So I know that I have root 2 over 2 and I have root 2 over 2. This here is cosine, this here is sine, and I know that tangent is sine over cosine. So if I put sine over cosine, that's the same thing as saying I'm dividing. So now I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. And these cross out, so I am left with 1. So tangent of negative 1035 degrees is 1. All right, let's do the same thing all over again for 6. Now 6 is negative 330. So if I go positive direction, so 330 is here. If I go positive direction, I'm going to go the same amount of direction, the same amount of degrees, but in the opposite direction. So instead of going this way, I'm now going to go this way. Distance stays the same, so here is my negative 330. And what is it asking us? It's asking for sine. Sine is the y, so sine of negative 330 is 1/2. And you're using your unit circle to find these out. Cosine of 870, I don't know what 870 is, so I'm going to subtract 360 from it and keep subtracting 360 until I get something manageable. This is the same thing as saying cosine of 150 degrees. Cosine of 150, I'm looking for 150, there it is. Cosine is my x value, so I have negative root 3 over 2. Sine of negative 3 pi halves. So 3 pi halves is here, that's in the positive direction, so I'm going to go the same amount distance, but in the opposite direction. And it's asking me for sine. Sine is the y, so sine is 1. Tangent of negative 2 pi, so again, positive direction is this direction, so negative direction is here. Ends up in the same spot, and it's asking for tangent of it, so tangent is sine over cosine, so sine over cosine, and then make sure you simplify that. 0 divided by 1 is just 0. Lastly, I have cosine of negative 14 pi thirds. This is where you gotta find those coterminal angles. Okay, so this is the way that I like to do these. I know 1 full rotation is 2 pi. In order for me to travel 2 pi's, I know that with my denominator being 3, 6 pi thirds is the same thing as 2 pi. if I travel 2 rotations, I need to get to 4. So that means I need to travel 12 pi, okay? So that means if I travel 12 pi thirds, I also have to travel 2 pi thirds in order to get to where I need to go. Now, I understand that there is a negative here. That's okay. Negative just tells us direction, not the distance. So then this right here is 2 revolutions or rotations and 2 pi thirds. So I'm going to put a negative in front of both because I need a negative. So now I'm traveling 2 full rotations. So I'm in the opposite direction. So in clockwise. So 1, 2. And now I'm traveling 2 pi thirds in the other rotation. Now, if you don't know what that distance is, look at it in the positive first, then match the distance. So for example, 2 pi thirds is here. So I'm going 90 degrees plus a little bit. So if I'm going 2 full rotations, I'm still here in the negative. I'm going 90 degrees and then a little bit. So that puts me at 4 pi thirds, which is exactly the same thing as negative 2 pi thirds. So we're here. And it's asking us to find cosine. And cosine is our x, so I should have negative 1/2. Okay, now we're almost done here. Find the reference angle. Reference angle, 3 things you need to know about a reference angle. That is another keyword. Reference angle means acute, positive, x-axis. So that means it's the acute angle, which is less than 90 degrees. It is positive, and it's from your x-axis. So then, if we know this full half rotation is 180 degrees, and we have 120, what is this distance here? And this distance is 60 degrees. And then for number 12 is again saying, if I go 1 full rotation, so if I complete this, where would I be? Well, I'd be at 36 pi over 9. So that means I went 1 full rotation, another full rotation, I'd be at 36 pi. But I'm not. There is a little bit missing. So how much more do I need to travel to complete this full rotation? So I'm going to subtract 32 pi ninths from it. So that means I am 4 pi ninths short of completing that rotation. That means that this reference angle is 4 pi ninths. Now, for those of you who converted this into degrees, don't do that. It's asking for radians, so your answer must be in radians. If you put an answer of degrees when it's asking for radians, it will be marked incorrect. All right, now the extra credit question, I wasn't expecting you to solve this without a calculator. My only expectation for the extra credit is for the correct setup. Since we have a side, an angle, and a side, we need to use the law of cosine. Law of cosine says that if you have this angle between 2 sides, we're going to take the cosine of that angle, and I work my way backwards. So then I have cosine of 32 times 17 times 30 times 2 minus 30 squared plus 17 squared. And that's equal to this opposite side. In this case, we can call it BC, segment BC squared. As long as you gave me this, you got 1 point extra credit. All right, beautiful people. Hopefully this clears up some misconceptions on your quiz. Remember, you are able to retake this. Hopefully you'll score much better than the first time around. If you are stuck on numbers 5 through 10, please come in for tutoring. I am always available. Just let me know when you are coming in so that way I can be in. Once again, thank you for watching, and hopefully you will do better on your retake. Take care.